I don't normally do this, but I guess I should more often, which is promote other videos within videos. And I just recorded a section of this, my last for now, that kind of ties in to the Space Cases episode. And I wouldn't normally talk about it, but I'm excited about it because I had a lot of fun doing it. I did it twice because I left out one word, and it only kind of changed the meaning of that sentence. But I thought I had a good time. I'll do it again. I'll do it perfectly, and I don't think I did perfectly, but I did it better. And so for this tomorrow morning, and the way it kind of ties in with the Space Cases episode is that it is about spiritualistic communications with ghosts. Now, back when I was doing the Space Cases, looking back at Space Cases, I got to the end, and I think I said in the video, now there's the unused script, unused Space Cases script, and I said maybe I'll read it and I'll do a blog post about it because I blog about what I read about and blog about what I read, and then I vlog about what I watch. But then I got to this point, and I'm not rewatching things right now, but I still want to be doing videos, so I thought, well, I've got that, and I'll just make another looking back at Space Cases. The only episode of Space Cases to get its own looking back at Space Cases. All the rest of them were in groups of 3 or 4, I think. So good for same old, same old. Now the script is available online, and I will put the link to where you can, if you go to the basic instructions, if you go to spacecasestv.com and then you go to the Peter David section, there's a table of contents. The Peter David section has several links, and at the very bottom is the same old, same old. You can click on the page that has the teaser, the first portion of the episode, and then there's another link for Act 1 and Act 2. So I will put the link to the page that has those 3 links in the description, and then you can read them all. And it says also that it's reproduced from the Comics Buyer's Guide, which I guess was a magazine from, I think, the 70s to fairly recently, that just had stuff like unused Space Cases stories in it. I don't think it was ever a comic book, but I'll have to learn more about that. But in any case, the script itself is online with permission from Peter David, one of the creators of Space Cases, and it is credited to him and Bill Mummy, and it's credited also story by Myrna David. It says, I'm thinking it's probably Myra David, who was Peter David's wife at the time, and that the N is just a typo, but I'm not absolutely positive. Maybe Myrna was some other relative or not a relative at all, but probably it was his wife at the time. So yeah, I will get into describing it. It starts in pretty much the same way most of them did, and at first it annoyed me. It just kind of felt like, this is just the same thing that they always do with the kids bickering. But that turns out to be the point. That, as Harlan later describes, they're kind of in a loop. They're taking care of the ship, they're piloting the ship, they're going to class. Nothing exciting is happening, and so I guess that means that weeks have passed in between episodes because each episode is something exciting happening. But he says this to explain why they're all bored and why they're at each other's throats, because they're bored. There's nothing to take their attention. The episode opens with him playing a video game simulation training sort of thing where he's got to defeat a bunch of spaceships, and he's playing with Bova. I guess Bova's not playing. Bova's just watching because Bova doesn't play around. Bova's very serious, no nonsense, and no fun. And so Bova's watching, and apparently it's a very hard video game. Harlan says, "If I win this time, you have to do dishes, my dishes, or my dish-doing responsibilities. You've got to take them for a week." And so they make that bet, and then Catalina and Rosie come in. It's supposed to be their turn, but Harlan has kept going because he's never gotten this far, I guess, and he's eaten into their turn. So what Catalina does is she takes Rosie's wrist and she pulls off Rosie's gloves, one glove, and applies Rosie's hand to Harlan's foot. which of course burns. He's got a shoe or whatever on, but it burns his foot and distracts him from the video game, and he loses. And then they all start bickering, and Radu enters, and of course Radu, being Radu, he enters, and Harlan immediately starts bickering at him, and then he starts bickering back, and it's the same old, which is the whole idea of the episode. And then the last same old sort of thing is they are distracted from their bickering by the image of the Krista up on the screen, which they see the Krista exploding, and they're confused because they're on the Krista, and they think is another message from the future referencing a previous episode. But they say, well, if we didn't survive, then how could we send the message? It turns out it was Commander Goddard and Thelma doing a simulation of how much fire the Krista could take with the shields and other defenses. So that is, but the last establishing thing that happens is Davenport sees that and then collapses, because that's what she does. She panics, is what she's known for doing, and then Harlan gives her a hard time about that. He's saying, if this were a real emergency, you wouldn't be able to help us because you would just panic and collapse, and with your head between your knees. So that's where we start. And there is, in the next part, a real emergency. They encounter another space anomaly called a quantum singularity, which I don't know exactly what it is, but what they're afraid of happening is if they get caught in it, it will slice up the Krista and thereby killing all of them. Bova and Radu, I think, are the ones in the command, and a panicking Miss Davenport are the ones in the command post at the time. Radu asks Thelma to take navigation so that he can take the helm and steer the ship out of it. And I don't remember exactly, but I think it was rare to see anyone but Harlan or Catalina at the helm. I think there actually might have been an entire episode about how Radu never gets to do the helm. And so he does guide them, drive them out of it with Thelma's help, and Davenport once again collapses and feels bad about collapsing. While this is happening, I'm looking through the script because unlike the other episodes, I haven't seen this 10 times. In fact, I haven't seen it at all. I've only read it the once. While that's happening, Catalina and Goddard are looking at the engine because something seems to be wrong with the engine. They notice that there's a leak. Something is leaking into whatever's below the engine, which it turns out is the haunted corridor. And Commander Goddard has named it that because there's something making noises down there, and as he puts it, not even Thelma knows what it is. So he's called the haunted corridor. He doesn't want anybody in it. He tells Catalina nobody goes in it, and Catalina, of course, comes back and she starts telling the other students, so there's this thing, it's called the haunted corridor, it's really neat, but Commander Goddard doesn't want us to go near it, so we shouldn't. And Rosie says, well, why not? It sounds interesting. And Catalina says, well, of course, but you're not going to go because you don't disappoint people. It's not your thing. And so this is where Rosie kind of feels like, well, people assume something about me, and it's not necessarily true. We have a classroom scene where Miss Davenport gives a kind of a lecture about how boredom can lead to practical jokes. And I think I don't know if this is before or after the episode that's all about practical jokes where her mouth gets glued shut or whatever. Similarities to other episodes might be why they ultimately didn't use this script, but I think it's a really great script. So she lists the Loch Ness Monster. Somebody was bored, and so they started this thing about a Loch Ness Monster, took this picture. She uses this, and I looked it up, the Piltdown Man, a paleoanthropological fraud in which the skull of a human and the jawbone of an orangutan were, this guy put them together, and he said, this is the missing link. This is between humans and apes. And for a long time people believed it, but it turned out not to be true. And I think she uses one other example, but the point is, I think she's trying to make the point, don't pull pranks on me just because you're bored, because she's afraid that that's what they'll do, because that's the kind of people that they are. I mean, Catalina's the kind of person who would use Rosie's hand as a weapon against Harlan, but children will be children. And I don't think he's ultimately too scarred. But I think actually probably Rosie's more scarred by the experience because her body was used as a weapon, and she's not that person. She wants everybody to be happy. But she also wants to not just be what people think she is. And so she says to Catalina, I'm going to go down to the haunted corridor. I'm going to spend the night there to prove that I am brave and that I can be a troublemaker and that I can break the rules. And on her way, and I guess Bova overhears this, and so he goes down to keep her company, and Thelma goes down as well. So later on, Catalina, Radu, Harlan are in the, it's described in the script as the team room. I think it's like the game room. And I think they might be having breakfast or lunch or something, or that might be actually happens earlier. Harlan's practicing karate, that's what it is. And Bova appears through the jump tubes and with a message, and he says that Rosie's been attacked by a ghost. And so they all then go down to the haunted corridor to save Rosie. Miss Davenport overhears, and she goes as well. And she decides, and she really makes an effort to put on a brave face here. So they go down, they find Rosie's stuffed animals, a lion, a tiger, and a bear, and they do the whole Wizard of Oz, lions and tigers and bears, oh my thing for some reason. And then they find Thelma's head, and they do a more interesting, to me, literary reference. Let me just see if I can find it exactly. Davenport picks up Thelma's head. She says, alas, poor Thelma. I knew her, Harlan, a droid of infinite jest and most excellent fancy. And Harlan doesn't seem to get that that's a reference to Hamlet, and I should have gotten, I mean, I knew it was reference to Hamlet. I should have seen certain things coming from it, because she's just so blasé and ironic about finding Thelma's head. And they keep going, and then a ghost comes at them, and Harlan tries to kick it, but ultimately just falls down because it's a ghost. He goes right through it. And then they, I think they see a Rosie-type vision at some point, but the monster that they encounter is got a creepy-looking face and two axes, and he's swinging the axes at them and backing them against a wall, and which they are ultimately find themselves stuck to the wall. And Davenport keep playing it cool, very determinedly playing it cool. The axes come closer and closer. I think it's Harlan or somebody suggests that we can't move, but Catalina, you can do your sonic scream, and she's about to scream, but then Rosie, with glowing, creepy eyes, comes down and puts her hand over Catalina's mouth, which freaks Catalina out. It's very scary, very Are You Afraid of the Dark? And then, and here's where, go to that link and go and read it if you don't want the ending spoiled. But it turns out that the whole thing was an elaborate practical joke, cooked up, I think at first by Goddard and Rosie, and Davenport was in on it, which is how she was able to play it cool the whole time, although she does yell at Commander Goddard for not telling her exactly what was going to happen, and she was genuinely a little scared by the axes and all of that, but it's all a practical joke, and they learn their lesson. Don't get complacent just because you're bored. Things could happen anytime, and so always be in space, so always be on your guard in space. And then Harlan says, so how did you do the ghosts? And Commander Goddard says, I didn't do the ghosts. And so then a ghost appears, and they all flee, and it turns out that it was being projected by Thelma's eyes. Her head is left behind. Her body comes along, picks up her head, and she has a snappy thing about jokes are fun or something. Let me see if I can find it. Humans are so easily amused, she said. She says, taking their, let's see, her eyes are lit up, projection beams. They hear moaning and wailing. They react to see ghosts hurtling toward them. And it doesn't say that they run away, but it looks like they do because they're not in the rest of the episode. And then she exits, and then, but anyway, so she does her own practical joke, and then she leaves, and then two actual ghosts appear, and they say, one says, this is all your fault, you had to complain about being bored, and now look, we're stuck with those nuts. That's right, blame everything on me like you always do, same old, same old. what goes around, not what goes around comes around, but completing the circle. Um, but that the appearance of those ghosts, it doesn't say what species they are. So maybe they're human, like so many other characters in Space Cases are, but maybe they're Lumanian. And what the now we're stuck with these nuts suggests is that the ghosts, whatever species they are the ones who guided the Krista to the Star Academy and linked it up so that everyone could get on board. Um, and then they did it as a joke because they were bored, or the one did as a joke because it was bored and the others annoyed. So maybe that's another reason that they didn't do it, because the ship having a will of its own and flying to the Star Academy and picking up its passengers on its own rather than being guided by ghosts is a little bit more interesting. Well, it's considerably more interesting as far as that backstory goes. So there are a bunch of reasons why they probably didn't film this episode. It covers similar ground as other episodes, and that last part at least, which they could have left out. But then again, real ghosts could have appeared and then just not said things that suggest what I just described. But it was fun to read. It reminded me a lot of not just Space Cases, but Are You Afraid of the Dark? Like, I could clearly picture each of the characters, all the sets. It was exactly the tone of the episodes. And then at the end, it reminded me a lot of Are You Afraid of the Dark? In just how scary it was. It would have been really scary for me back when I was first watching Space Cases. So that was fun. And yeah, so I will try to come up with some more things to do, at least for the next couple of weeks, in addition to reading more, not from this book, but from other books that are classics and out of copyright. And yeah, so check this out. You can read it for yourself. It's definitely a fun half hour's worth of reading. And